Okay, my name is Nicholas Leblovic. I'm 80 years old. I was born in England in 1944. My mother was English. My father was Czechoslovakian. They met during the war because my father was stationed in England during the war. Initially, we went back to the war. We came back, which would be 45, I think. We returned to Czechoslovakia. We stayed there, I think 3 years or 4 years. And then we came to England, and in 49 I came to Canada. Well, my father, as I said, was in the government in Czechoslovakia, so we would have, when we went back, he went back after the war. We had a home there, a very nice home. And it's in the second city called Bratislava, which is the second largest city in Czechoslovakia. Unfortunately, several years after we moved there, the communist government came in, and we had to leave the country. My mother had the foresight of putting me on my own passport, which not normally when a child of that age, but she, for some reason, did that, which allowed me to leave the country as a British citizen. If you were a Czech citizen, which I would have been presumed to be without a passport because my father was Czech, there would have been restrictions. And my father actually was not allowed to leave for about 2 or 3 months after. He was actually put in jail. But he got released and then came to England where my maternal grandparents lived. My mother was English, as I said. We lived with them for under a year, I believe. And then my mother had 2 aunts who lived in Canada, one in Ottawa and one in Burlington. And I can tell you a little bit about her. Lived here, and they, I don't know whether they sponsored us or, but we came to Canada. This would be in 49. And that's sort of how we came to Canada, and sort of a little bit of the drama of the first 5 years of my life. Well, but we wanted to we wanted a stable family relationship, okay? In Czechoslovakia was obviously not acceptable, and communists would have been difficult to find a profession. I went to school there in my early years, so I did speak the language. I've basically forgotten it since then because we didn't use it very much. But they wanted some stability. England was just coming out of the war. It was very difficult to get a job. There was discrimination against people with foreign-sounding names. My father, I think, had difficulty, even though he was a trained lawyer and had been in the government, he couldn't find a job, so we were sponsored to come to Canada by one or more of my great aunts, which we had mentioned. And my father had to work and learn a new profession, and did so, and did very well here, actually. That's why we came to Canada, because it had more opportunities, and we've had a great, wonderful life here, actually. We actually came over on what would have been a troop ship. We came over in the North Atlantic I think it was November. I can check the dates. You can probably check the dates better on that paperwork I had here. It was North Atlantic in November is a very, very difficult trip. They didn't have good stabilizers for ships back in those days. The North Atlantic was very rough. Most of the people were seasick most of the trip over. My father and I didn't seem to avoid that. But so we came over, and we didn't have like joint sleeping quarters. I slept with my mother. The males were all put down in the hold of the ship, so like barracks type transportation. So it was very much it wasn't a cruise. Let's put it that way. Okay, so. Came to Canada. It was, as I said, we landed in Ottawa, and as we were sponsored. We came to Burlington. I was put up. My aunt who lived here took me we were separated. My mother and dad, my mother, brother, and father went to live with my aunt in Ottawa for the first while, and then I lived with my aunt here in Burlington for, I think it would be about 6 months. Well, I can tell you the most difficult was my father getting a job. I mean, there was no social services at all at that time, right? You didn't have government Medicare, you had private medical care. I assume there was some minor support, but most of the supports for people who didn't have was probably from private charities. I think that was where, that's probably, and I'm surmising that because, as I said, there was no government pensions, there was no government Medicare, so you had to pay for your own doctor and so on. And if you didn't have a job, you went into a home somewhere, right? I mean, there wasn't government money being provided for those kind of things. So that would be the most difficult thing. My dad, who, as I said, was a trained lawyer, also worked as a senior government official, had to take a job selling door-to-door stuff by car, in a broken down car, traveling all over Ontario to sell some sort of trinkets and things like that. He had some contacts. My father was very fluent in about 6 languages, as a lot of Europeans are. He could speak Czech and German and Polish and a little bit of Russian and that kind of stuff. So and there was a small or growing European population that had come over. The area north of New Street between Dines Road and Cumberland, a lot of truck farms there, and people who were immigration set up, who had farming background would set up. So that he had some connections with that, and it was very helpful in his later business years where he was able to sell to the community. So yeah, the difficulty was getting jobs. My mother had 2 children. She had to stay home. She did some light housework for my aunt. Well, I think it was difficult. I don't think, as I said, there was no. You had to make it on your own. I mean, yes, we came here, and it's a wonderful land of opportunity, but I don't think there were the support mechanisms that you have now for people. You see people, immigrants or refugees, coming in here. The government steps in, or private charities step in and provide a lot of support in terms of jobs and monies. That wasn't there. As I said, you had to make it on your own. You either became a farmer or you had to find a profession. And it was, and I mean, as I said, my dad was a lawyer. The law profession is totally closed. It still is to some extent. If you don't graduate from here, you don't get a job as a lawyer. I mean, you've been brought up in a different legal system, which the European system is. So you can't just put up a shingle here and start to practice law. You have to go through the schooling and get it. And you can't do that when you've got a family and 2 kids to support, or 3 kids at some point. So he had to find another profession. He ultimately went into the insurance business and did very, very well. One of the top producers for his company, did very well. Gave us a very comfortable life after we got established. But it was difficult to get established, and as I said, you had to make it on your own and find a way. A lot of people had families, which we did. We did give you some support, but otherwise you had to do whatever you could do, whatever you could make. It wasn't any difficulty. No, I mean, yes, it was trauma. You know what the most difficult thing was? I had to leave my dog behind in Czechoslovakia. Couldn't take it with me. I mean, when you're 5 years old, what's the most important thing? Your pet, right? I didn't have any brothers or sisters at the time, so I had a small dog. I had to leave it. That was very sad. That was the hardest thing for me. My parents, my parents were. It was circumstance which caused me. We would have never left there, but for the fact that the communists came. My father was well established. He had a beautiful home. I was going to school there already. I was understanding the language. That would have been my life there, probably, but for the fact that the government changed and made it impossible for us to stay. I don't regret it. I mean, it's a wonderful journey here in Canada as well. Well, I'll tell you one of the most difficult things was having a foreign last name. There was a lot of we didn't have as cosmopolitan the population as we have now. So you had some people with foreign-sounding names coming in, but the population was mostly Anglo-Saxon. And there was when you're 8 and 10, there was all sorts of discrimination, funny name and that kind of stuff. So I got bullied a lot and so on. So it was, but didn't make me. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So, I think my father had a good education, so he had a good grounding. He didn't start from, so he could move from what the profession he was in to something else. He ended up being, they said, a very successful insurance salesman, did very well. We had lots we didn't want for anything in terms of food and clothing and holidays and all that kind of stuff. So the transition would have been easier than for other people who came here who perhaps didn't speak the language or something like that, right? Or couldn't find a job easily or had to go into menial work or mines. A lot of people who came here at that time ended up in Sudbury in the mines and places like that because that's where the jobs were. And they were good paying jobs, but your lifetime tended to be a little bit shorter if that was where you spent your days and nights, right? So that was hard on them. So, I think he had the skill set. My mother obviously had family support here, which helped us to get. And then once we got a home and my father got a job and I got school, you just became part of the community. I think when you come like here, I think your dreams are probably pretty focused on getting established, getting a home, meeting friends, getting a job. So that when you come as a refugee, I think you have fairly low expectations and high hopes, right? And I think the community here was exactly what we wanted and needed. I mean, we could have gone to Saskatchewan, we could have British Columbia. Who knows? Who knows where you end up? You end up here because you've got relatives here, right? So there's no magic in it. And then we would have probably adapted to where we came. I think we were very lucky to end up in this. And we've stayed here, as I said, our whole lives. So we obviously we like it here and enjoy the community and have lots of friends here. And it's been a great ride. So that's interesting because they said my father would have. I mean, things like holidays is the biggest one. I mean, we weren't a big religious family, so that was never an issue. My mother would have been born Anglican. My father was probably brought up in a Catholic tradition in Europe. We went to church, but we went to St. Luke's here. It was the only Anglican church just up here. And I can still remember when Reverend Heathcote was the minister there. He was deaf. He couldn't hear you very well, and he sort of had a monitor. But no, we fitted into the culture here. We brought our own. Like we would have because my father was Catholic, we would have a Christmas Eve dinner, which is consistent more with a European tradition. Christmas Eve dinner, which would always be seafood because it's Christmas Eve. And then we would have an English tree and presents on Christmas morning and go down and open presents with Father Christmas or Santa Claus or whatever you want to call it. Right? So those are holidays or what we did. But it was, as I said, a bicultural family, and we lived. My mother had to try to adapt to my father's culture, and he with my mother. So it was an interesting mixture. We didn't have a Canadian culture for that. We adapted to Canadian habits and holidays and things like that. But we had sort of a multifaceted European culture we had in our family, with the English side for my mother and the European side for my father. So, see, the thing is, we came over to Canada with next to nothing. I mean, as immigrants, when we left Czechoslovakia, we could take next to nothing with us. We weren't allowed to. So, you took your heirlooms with you, and that was all you got. So So here I have a copy of my birth certificate. I'll just show you. It's a British birth certificate. Showed me when I was born, who my godparents were, my mother, my father. I don't know whether godparents are on here. Anyway, here it is here, my mother, my father, and so on. That's probably just a standard piece of paper. And then this is my passport, my English passport. I got that when I was, I think I would be about 4 when I got this, 3 or 4. And my mother had the sense of putting me on my passport in order to make sure that I had a tie to Britain, because we were going to a foreign country. And I was born in England, and it was very useful because when we had to leave Czechoslovakia, because I had this, I had no problem leaving what was a communist country at that time to get out, because we weren't. And I used it obviously to immigrate to Canada. And a picture of me when I was small. And this is just my Canadian citizenship certificate I got when I was 16, I think. So 65, 44, yeah. So, no, 21, I guess it would be 21, yeah. Back in those days, 21 was your guy. So I got my Canadian citizenship. So I have dual citizenship. I was born in England. So anyway, that's a little bit of background on that paper. I mean, having the connections to family in Burlington helped very much. Gave me a place to stay, as I said. In terms of the community organizations, I'm just trying to think the church, we were involved very much with St. Luke's Church at that time. I mean, it was the only Anglican church in Burlington. My mother was Anglican. My dad was married in the Anglican church. So, and there was community activities associated with that. Not so much for the children, but certainly for the adults. They had book clubs and other things like that. My mother didn't get too involved in community activities. My dad, as I said, was an insurance salesman, and he would have had more connections to the community. We had a lot of friends in Burlington, family friends, which we associated with. And a lot of Europeans. There were a couple of other families which have a long connection. There's a family called Stefani. Dr. Stefani was a medical doctor, German. Lived most of his time I knew him on Lake Shore, just east of Walker's Line. Still, the home is still there. But we socialized with it because my dad spoke in German, so it was an extended cultural connection. So, and we still know them. I still know the family. Family still lives in Burlington. Part of the family still lives here, so I know them. So we have that connection. Like I said, I joined Cubs and Scouts and things like that. That was the kind of activity you did. I moved from the Anglican Church in downtown Burlington here to the church on Guelph Line, which is where we were. Our home was, our extended family home was there, just up the Guelph Line, and they had a much more youth-oriented focus. So it was good. I was in my teens, early teens, and it was a social activity. I joined the Scouts and the Cubs and that kind of thing. It was when I was younger. Went to camp a couple of times. We had family holidays in summertime, in some of the lakes and so on. But we spent a lot of our summers in Burlington because we had a swimming pool, and my father put a swimming pool in, so it was a great place to spend, and you could bring your friends to your house and so on. A lot of family parties and stuff like that. Burlington was a nice place. It was very small. I can remember Brad Street, walking up Brad Street. There were no food markets in Burlington at that time. You shopped at the local grocery store, and the grocery store on Brand Street was owned by a guy named Charlie Showers. Who lived halfway up between Lakeshore and just some north of Lakeshore, maybe half a kilometer. And where the parking lot was, that's up there. The city parking lot was there. And we knew all the little stores that were there that were on there. We'd shop there. I'd go to the movie house on the Roxy Theater, which is still, the building is still there, but it's not, the theater's not there. So it's the kind of thing you did. You played a lot with your friends. I played tennis. We joined the Roseland. We played tennis at the Roseland Club for a while. We never got full membership. We'd go over there and play. That was close to where my parents' last home was. So we enjoyed that. Got into scouts and cubs and that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit much most of what kind of things we did. Oh, it was totally different. I mean, it was mostly white Anglo-Saxon Protestant communities. I'm using the word Protestant, don't necessarily, they were Catholics as well, obviously. But it was very English and white, I think, mostly. Obviously, there were European components, culturally different, because they came over after the war. I know they said north of, a lot of them were in farming, which would be, the areas I can think of were between Guelph Line and east of Guelph Line and north of New Street. There was a whole area where you have Cumberland and Dines Road. Those are all farm countries, truck farming there, right? My father, as I said, was associated or had business connections with the people there. He said, Burlington, there was no Queen Elizabeth Highway at the time when we first came here. As I said, there was very little north of New Street other than farming, right up to the Queen Elizabeth, all that area, right across Burlington, which is now obviously developed, and right up to the Queenie and then north. There was nothing there. It was all farming, or I don't know if it was woodland or not, but it was certainly undeveloped. The population base was all down close to the lake. So, as I said, you didn't have a lot of social in terms of social services, there was very little government services. I mean, there were private social services that you could get into, some of them either religious-based or not, which could support people who needed it. But kids made their own. You didn't have helicopter parents. We went off when I was a kid. I'd go off at 8 or 9, 10. I'd go off for the day. My parents didn't expect to see me until dinner. They didn't know where I was. A lot of the times I was down on the lake. I went down to the lake and walked along right along by the lake where the banquets were. My parents didn't worry that I might fall in the lake and drown. Just go off and enjoy yourself and come back at dinner at 5 o'clock. We're having dinner. So you have to have. I think you have to be adaptive because it's a cosmopolitan culture here. I think many other countries in both the European and perhaps even more so in the Eastern cultures are very unicultural. And so when you come here, you get exposed to a much broader, diverse type of experiences. So you have to have patience, you have to have acceptance and flexibility for that. I think it's a wonderful thing actually to have multicultural experiences. I mean, just in terms of the food and the restaurants you can go to, theaters you can go to, the book clubs you can go to, all those kind of things. It makes you give you a broader perspective on the world, I think. So, I think those countries coming here, it allowed people who were either unsuccessful or oppressed in other countries to come here allowed them to continue to live their own cultures and also become exposed to the cultures of your neighbors and friends and other parts of the community. So it makes you I think a more complete person. Oh, I think the government is looking for immigration. We can see that in some of the government policies, which are allowing people to come here and get established without going through the rigorous process that some other countries have if you want to come live there. I think there's more opportunities than there are challenges. I think the challenges are the cost of living here is pretty high, and it's getting higher. Lack of affordable housing, I think, is particularly something which is a challenge for. I mean, we were very fortunate to be able to buy a house. My parents within 5 years of 5 years of coming here, buy a house, and even me, the next generation, was able to afford a house. I think it's a hard thing right now for people who come here, unless you've got family here that can accommodate you or help you. I think it's very hard. I would say that. Getting a job, obviously, is if you don't want to be stuck at home. I mean, I would think that a lot of people, especially those educated, don't want to be getting into basic jobs like farming and agriculture and seasonal type work and so on. I think getting established is hard, especially if you're a professional, because you have to, if you are a doctor or a lawyer or something else in another country, if you come over here, you don't automatically open up your own shop. You have to go through the accreditation process. Those are sometimes closed shops in terms of, especially if you're changing law. I mean, if you come from a European country and you're brought up in the Napoleonic Code, come here, totally, you can't just open up a shop. You got to go back to school. Those are the kind of things. I don't think they're unique to Canada. I think they're if you go to any place that's foreign, culturally foreign to you or educationally foreign to you, you have to go through hoops to get established. And language barriers are also a problem as well. If you don't speak the language, it's a problem. If you don't speak English or perhaps French, it becomes a more difficult problem as well. Yes, I mean, to one extent, I mean, a lot of people are coming here because they're running away from something, a situation which is not necessarily what they want to spend their lives. They're looking for more opportunity. So that's sort of similar to what we were doing. However, it's a lot of the people coming here to live are coming here not because they are running away from something necessarily, but because they see more opportunities here. And either because of family or because of their own resources, or they don't have an economic struggle to get established here. I know there's even programs the federal government has to assist people who, especially if you're setting up a business here, to allow them to accelerate their citizenship and so on, to get a place here. So anyway, I don't think it's the same thing when you're coming from a war-ravaged community like Europe was. I think it's a different imperative that you go through when you're coming here because you just want a better life. It gives you a little more. It's not quite so urgent. You can come here and fit in, especially if you've got family here who can help you acclimatize yourself and get you integrated into the community. No, I mean I think I've given you pretty much everything. As I said, I'm very happy to come to Canada. Very happy to have had an opportunity to see it develop and grow. It's given me a lot back. I think my wife and I are very happy here. We're pleased. We're pleased we chose Burlington. Just looking at I'm going to make it try to be neutral. Some of the issues in living in more metropolitan areas like Toronto. I think we're very happy that we're here, and it hasn't quite got to that stage yet here in Burlington. So we have a much more, I think, a little more relaxed lifestyle here. But I think it's part of the community. And sounds like you've come here the same way I did, perhaps a little bit later than I did. But it's nice for me to sit back and do a little bit of, you're so tied up in your day-to-day life, you don't start to think about the journey you've come through, and you look back on it and say, boy, am I lucky. I'm a lucky person, and we've still got, both my wife and I still have our health, so we're able to enjoy the community as well. So.